Welcome back to the Grant Writing Experts podcast. In today's episode, we're joined by Elaine Navarro, founder and chief awesome officer of Just Look Left Creative Grant Consulting. Based in Oregon, Elaine has built a thriving consultancy supporting nonprofits with grant strategy, research, and relationship building. Elaine shares how she identifies what she calls her unicorn funders, the rare grant makers who provide true partnership through multi-year support, general operating grants, and accessible trust-based relationship. She also walks us through her checklist of evaluating funders, red flags to watch out for, and why relationship building is just as important as the grant writing itself. Whether you're just starting your journey in grants or you're an experienced professional looking to refine your prospecting process, this episode is packed with practical insights you can put into action right away. Let's dive in. Well, Elaine, thanks for taking the time to do this conversation today. I'm excited to dig into all things grants and prospecting and relationship building. But to start things off, can you help us and the listeners get to know you and your journey better by sharing more about you, your current role, and how you got into grant work?
Certainly. Yes. Thanks for having me. My name is Elaine Navarro. I'm the founder and chief awesome officer of Just Look Left Creative Grant Consulting. We're based in
Cool title.
Oregon. Yeah, when you own a business, you can call yourself whatever you want. So that's what I landed on. Yeah, we're based in Oregon, primarily serving Oregon-based nonprofits, but we do have a few clients outside of that. So the business turned 5 last month, which was very exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Started as a one-woman show back in 2020 and now have a team of 5 amazing women plus myself, supporting a ton of really impactful nonprofits. Like a lot of people in this space, I fell into grants. In 2009, I wrote my very first one when I was working for a municipality outside of Portland, Oregon. We were lucky enough to be awarded that one, and that became a large part of my job. So it just kind of happened, but never thought that I'd have my own business and be leading an amazing team doing this work full time. So life is funny that way.
Oh my goodness. So you probably got a lot of experience under your belt over the past 5 years and before that. Is there a particular project or relationship with a funder that comes to mind that you're especially proud of over all this time?
You know, the Oregon funding landscape is a really special one. I mean, there's so many different opportunities out there in terms of grants, but over my time working in this space, I've really narrowed down like my list of what I call unicorn grant funders to a pretty small list. Those are the ones that there's just a really beautiful reciprocal relationship, both with my team and I, as well as the nonprofits that we serve. We have an excellent relationship with the Oregon Community Foundation. It's the largest funder in Oregon. They have so many different amazing staff people that they've really become a beautiful referral partner for us as well. So I feel really, really good when I know that like a funder trusts us, to kind of put their neck on the line to send a nonprofit our way that they know that we can support. So that's been really cool to see that relationship grow and flourish over time.
That's awesome. I think if the people that listen to this will probably want to be able to find their own unicorn list of funders that have that kind of relationship. But you have a bit of a reputation for being really selective about the funders that you pursue, as you kind of just alluded to. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to unpack how you make those choices. Can you walk me through your process for evaluating whether a potential funder is the right match for you or your client's organization?
For sure. I mean, we certainly utilize instrumental for kind of the first and second pass in terms of funders that are out there in the landscape, especially if it's outside of our zone of genius, which I would consider Oregon for the time being. However, it's, as I've grown and morphed my team, I have a lot of just things inside here that I often have to get outside of my brain so my team understands, well, why are we approaching this funder and not this funder? So general operating support is the way to my heart. I feel that is a really good sign of a funder that is very trust-based and understands that a grantee knows where their funding is needed most and isn't requiring a nonprofit to really build out a program or morph themselves into a specific kind of box that the funder is looking for. So I love general operating support. I love multi-year funding. I love funders that don't require you to take a year off, because if it's a large grant award, that's a lot of funding that's then not available that following year, and it really is not sustainable for our organizations. Obviously, there needs to be a clear geographic alignment. It's always interesting to me when I see funders that say that they fund for certain states, and then you look at their 990 and you see that that's actually not the case. So I always make sure that their website and their 990 aligns with what they say that they're looking for. And then I think the biggest thing is this is such a people industry. And I think initially when folks become grant writers, they may not realize that that is the case. You think that you're kind of insular, you're just writing grants, your head's down. I'm I'm not very outgoing typically. And so I used to think that I could, just hang out in my bedroom office and clients would just come my way. And that's certainly not the case. But I think that that's something, when I see that funders are out there in community hosting workshops for prospective grantees, really, communicating and working well with other funders in that same space, that's a very clear sign to me that this is a funder that cares about the community, cares about grantees, and really helping to level that playing field, making sure that we are not wasting our resources approaching an opportunity that isn't aligned, and they're not wasting their resources receiving a grant application that clearly is just never going to be funded. And those are a few things that I look for. And on the backside of that, in terms of reporting, it's nice to see funders that over time are starting to simplify their grant application process, their reporting process, to ensure that organizations, whether they have a grant writer or not, are able to apply and successfully report on a grant, and it's not overly burdensome that at the end of the day you're like, I almost wish I didn't get that funding because it really wasn't worth it. And so those are kind of some key pieces that I look for in my sleuthing of funders.
Okay, that's like a really good checklist. Also, part of your approach is probably knowing when not to pursue a funder. Are there any red flags that you look for when you're evaluating them or evaluating a list rather?
Yes, unfortunately. So I often call myself amongst my team, I'm a bit of a dream crusher, because a lot of clients will come to me and they'll be like, oh, I heard about so and so foundation, or I know about this foundation, da 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 da. And yes, I'm happy to explore any and all of those. But if I have experience working with a funder that has been misaligned or really was a challenge, I'll of course steer my client away from that particular opportunity, and I'll share why. Similarly, I think there can be a misalignment with how funders are portraying themselves publicly and then what we see on the private end of what they're actually funding. If we see that funders, say that they're open to new grantees, but we look at instrumental and clearly see that 99% of their funding is going towards return grantees, that's a big red flag for me. Or if they don't even list their contact information on their website. And I mean, that's a big barrier for organizations that are really trying to get to know these funders on a personal level when they can't even contact them to ask simple questions.
So it sounds like often what funders say they care about and what the data proves they actually fund, sometimes those are very different things. Do you have a process for how you, I guess the word would be like validate if what you're seeing or hearing about them is true or not?
Mm-hmm.
How do grant professionals go about looking at a funder and doing almost like a double check to make
Right.
sure that what they're seeing on the surface is actually true, or what someone is telling them when they forward them an opportunity is actually true?
For sure. I mean, I really feel prior to using Instrumental, it took so much more legwork for me to find out those intricacies, but just how you guys do the funder reports within Instrumental has saved so much time in terms of understanding, what states are these organizations funding in, at what levels are they funding organizations, because a website can say something, maybe we fund up to $50,000, but you look then and they're actually only funding $5,000. That's a big difference. And can determine whether a lift is worth it or not in approaching a particular opportunity. The openness to new grantees is very important as well. And then just being able to look and see, some funders are very broad based and say that they fund a lot of different sectors, which is lovely. But you can also see on the back end that maybe they actually aren't. And maybe 90% of it is going towards youth education, which is lovely and wonderful. But if you're an environmental organization, maybe it doesn't make sense to approach that funder at that time. Or it's an opportunity to have a conversation about maybe they just haven't received nearly as many applicants in that area and they're looking to expand. And we wouldn't know that if we didn't reach out and chat with them a little bit.
So all those things you mentioned, you said that Instrumental covers a lot of it because we do on the funder research side. But what did you do before you had Instrumental? Did you still go through that, or was it just something you had to take a chance on? What did it look like in the old world of doing this kind of research?
Yeah, it was a lot of going into Candid, sifting through 990s, hoping that there was that special attachment that some private foundations include and some don't, of like, okay, who has been funded by this organization in the past, pairing it longitudinally over the past years to see if we're seeing trends or similarities in terms of the organizations that are funded, or if we're seeing a lot of new names each year. So yeah, it was a lot more paperwork, a lot more digging through, and a lot more incomplete information. So yeah, it's saved a ton of time for the team and I, and it's been a really fun platform to train my new team members on as well.
That's cool. I'm unfamiliar with Candid's interface on the research, but why is it a lot more paperwork? Like, do you have to go through the individual 90s that are hosted on Candid, or do they present it in a
Yeah.
different way?
At least back
Okay.
in the day when I was doing it prior to Instrumental, no, it was like you'd click into each year's 990 and there was no like dashboard kind of pulling that intricate information out for you. It was you digging through, and on my other screen, I'd have kind of an Excel spreadsheet going on, and it was a mess. It was a total mess.
Well, we're glad that you're using Instrumental now and it's making the process a lot more streamlined. So you build your list, you help your clients submit the grants, you win the grants, and that's one thing. But then keeping the relationship strong to keep the multi-year funding going. I'd love to hear learn about your approach to that side of work. Do you have a story that comes to top of mind for how you invest in building relationships with a funder? Uh, Maybe there's an example of one that paid off in a really big way.
Yeah. I think it all goes back to just being curious and open. At the end of the day, kind of my mantra really is funders are friends. I think that there's just a past narrative of, funders are up here with the money, the nonprofits are down here. There's this power imbalance, and funders really don't want to hear from us little nonprofits down here. And I don't think that that's true for the majority of the good funders that are out there. So I had an interesting experience with a local family foundation. I had a slight in with them because one of the founders' kids was a member at our local boxing gym. So I knew them kind of on the periphery. So I used that to approach just with an email. They were interested in the project. It was a historic preservation project. We had the folks from the foundation out for a site visit to see the building, meet the executive director, just kind of walk through, do all the things. They were super excited about it. We got a nice little check from them in the mail. And then one of the founders mentioned the project to his mom, who also has an interest in historic preservation. So now that organization is getting at least 3 times a year checks directly from that new large individual donor that's helping to sustain the operations and to complete the restoration of this really cool historic space. So it's like you never know who 6 degrees of separation sort of a thing.
Hmm.
So just, yeah, remaining curious, getting out into community, leveraging your existing connections. I never would have thought, this kid goes to our boxing gym. Like, how would that have then led to, not only a couple really great grant awards, but now an invested individual donor in this organization too. It's just, again, funny how the universe tends to work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is that something that you can plan for those things happening, or is it really just you have to put your best foot forward and when it comes up, it comes up?
I wish there was a way. Yeah, I mean, it feels very serendipitous to me. I'm sure there's others that probably have a better way of capitalizing on that, but in my experience, it really is, the larger your warm network is, the more connections are possible and viable out there.
Yeah. So I guess if you do good work and you build good relationships, those things will come with time.
That's what it
Or you
seems
increase,
like.
yeah, luck comes to those who are prepared, or whatever the saying
There we
is.
go. Yes.
Yeah. So once a grant's awarded, what's your rule of thumb for keeping that partnership healthy over time? The part that you can plan.
For sure. So always, I mean, it goes a long way sending a handwritten thank you. We always encourage our clients to do that. And then reminding our clients also, and we help with this also on the back end of just at least those quarterly updates, to funders, what's going well, what are we experiencing in terms of challenges so that it's not a fire drill when that final report comes up to being due. The funder is aware and can help the grantee pivot as necessary. Things just happen, and as much as we can plan for them, sometimes they don't go to plan. Inviting funders to grantees events, making sure that they're receiving annual reports and fun updates like that. And then on the opposite side, we really engage a lot with program officers via LinkedIn, and if they're active on Instagram, like, they're humans as well. And so we like to always be engaging and seeing what they're up to and what's important to them, and really asking our clients, when available, to attend those funder events also, whether it is a workshop that they're putting on, or Oregon has a really beautiful thing like this conversation with funders where a whole panel of funders get together, whether it's virtual or in person, where you can meet a tons of great folks all at once. So kind of just, again, that FaceTime in-person connections, there's nothing better than that. So we always just kind of encourage those continuous touch points.
Is there a way that you advise your clients to manage all of that when they have multiple funders of different stages and like it's just people, you got to treat people differently all the time. How do you help your clients manage all the different check boxes they have to hit with each funder?
We have at least monthly meetings with our clients the first Tuesday of the month. So when we know that either a report is coming up or it's been a little while since we've interfaced with the funder, we'll have on our list there, like, all right, what are the touch points that we need to be doing this month with, we have all of the existing or open grant awards listed on there in terms of next steps and what that can and should look like. We manage all of our grants right now in GEMS. So we have, tasks assigned to us as folks on the team. And we're pretty new with this software. So we're going to be launching kind of the client side so they can see inside their portal as well if there's an action item assigned to them, that sort of thing. So we have both, face-to-face touch points with them as well as working on getting them more ingrained in our own project management system. So to be determined on that front. But yeah, we send a lot of reminders. I wish everybody was on Slack, but email suffices as well.
You have to live in email thread sometimes.
Yes.
Working with so many clients, are there any things you find yourself having to educate your clients on a lot more than other things when it comes to funder relationships? Like, what do most nonprofits misinterpret or misunderstand about building relationships?
I really think that they often do forget that funders do want to hear from them. Like, they think that they're a bother. They think that they're a burden. They think, oh, well, we got the money now. We'll just do what we said we were going to do and we'll send a final report. Like, some funders maybe, but the ones that we work with most often, like, really care and really want to be involved. And it's such a small network here that if you're doing a great job with one funder, it's very easy for that funder to then recommend you to another. So I say, be forthcoming and open with the great things that are happening in your organization, and make sure that you're keeping your funding partners apprised to that, because they really do care.
What kind of funders are these? Like, is it just like the smaller family foundations that want to be involved in this way? Like, do you have a different approach you have for different types of funders? Or is it all, you have to do all these things for every funder?
It kind of depends. I mainly work in the private philanthropic space, but that can be from a very small family foundation up to, the Oregon Community Foundation, as I was mentioning earlier. They're all a little bit different. Some of them have staff large enough that you're assigned, a program officer. That's your point of contact. That's your person. Others, they don't have any paid staff, so you're working with maybe the board president, that sort of thing. So there is a lot of nuance within it, and some funders have more capacity to be doing kind of those more outward facing events and workshops and things to support their grantees along the way. So it does vary, but I think the essence is the same in terms of just communication and no surprises. Nobody wants to be surprised when they get a final report when they were thinking everything was going really well, come to find out, oops, it wasn't. And this could have been mitigated way earlier if the funder had been aware that the grantee was having an issue.
Are there any other potential risks that nonprofits should be aware of when it comes to building really good relationships with funders that sometimes they can walk into if they're not aware? I guess I'm trying to highlight the speed bumps along the way that nonprofits should be aware of, because there's always so much to know. And if someone doesn't point it out, you can get yourself in a pickle.
I think on the other side of the coin of being worried to show, oops, our project didn't go quite as planned, or, we did run into some issues submitting that final report. On the flip side, funders talk, like we said, it's a small funding landscape. So if you were working with a funder and it didn't go particularly well, and you didn't give them a heads up that something was going awry, or didn't ask for their support in making it right, they're probably going to talk to their colleagues at other funding agencies, and that's going to carry over there if you're then looking to apply at that agency. So it's just, I think, transparency over everything, and really staying 2 steps ahead as humanly possible, just to help salvage those relationships, continue to build upon those relationships, because if things go awry, it won't remain in a vacuum. You just want to make sure that you're portraying your organization, putting your best foot forward at all times as humanly possible.
Yeah, people talk, so you have to be aware of that.
They sure do.
With building relationships with funders, one of the things we hear a lot from instrumental users is that a lot of their funders are tied to the personal relationship between a board member or a particular member in the leadership team at the nonprofit with the funder. Is that a risk that you see with your clients, and is it something to mitigate and try and spread out, or is it just a nature of this line of work?
I do see that sometimes, particularly with the smaller family foundations, like what we were talking about. And it's the hardest part for us as a consultancy is that, we have our own relationships with these funders, and there's only so far that we can take our personal relationships with the funders. We leverage that to then get clients to have a good foot in the door and have a warm lead and a good conversation. But we can't outsource our relationship for our clients necessarily, if that makes any
Hmm.
sense. So kind of the same thing, if there is a specific connection, it's always, as humanly possible, bringing that funder or bringing that board member into the fold. So maybe they're meeting the whole board at some point, because if that board member leaves, that relationship leaves with them. So yeah, it's very difficult. It can take a lot of time, but yeah, to put all your eggs in one basket in terms of one specific relationship, or on the opposite end, if that board member leaves that funding agency, that's even worse. As much as possible, just to have multiple points of contact so that folks don't get into that situation. But it happens, but it's never ideal, and most of the time it can be mitigated for sure.
This is always an interesting question we get from folks that use instrumental, but how many funders should a nonprofit have at any given time? Is there a sweet spot for the size of a portfolio? And I know that that's like a total it depends kind of question.
It depends, but it's more, I think the question really is like, how dependent on grants should an organization be? In an
It's a
ideal
good reframe.
world, there's, yeah, no more than 20 to 30% of their annual operating budget is based on grants. The other, piece of that pie that needs to be filled is with, our individual donor base, fundraising events, corporate sponsorships, all of that fun stuff. I get a lot of heartburn when I have organizations come to me that are entirely grant funded or think that grants are going to solve all of the problems. Unfortunately, it's just not the case. I wish it was. I love grants, but they can only go so far. As long as you're working towards becoming less grant reliant and you're building up your other sources of income, because we know that grants, we can have a great year, we can have a terrible year. It really depends. And it's not because you wrote a grant that was bad. It's because everybody is feeling the strain nowadays, especially in the private philanthropic space, that it's just so much more competitive. Some funders that we used to approach that had a 50% success rate are now funding less than 10% of the applications that they're receiving. And it's nobody's fault. It's just what it is. So
Hmm.
to start to become less reliant on grant funding is always ideal. And how can we help elevate or alleviate that burden off of organizations so that they can then focus on building up their individual giving, all of those other kind of pieces of revenue that are equally as important.
That's an interesting point. Do you see grant strategies changing with everything going on in the federal side and the private side these days?
I do. I think it continues. Diversification is super important. I haven't seen it a ton yet in the organizations that I work with, that we have some pretty consistent annual grant funders, but again, like, we can't rely on that consistency now as we did in the past. Yeah, so continuing to diversify. For those that don't have an individual giving program or haven't been focused in on it as much, now is the time. It's like, you gotta get those local dollars really leveraged and growing, because yeah, it's a little wild out there. Everything's gonna be fine. I don't want to scare tactic anybody, but it's like, this is the time now that if you're not already, to really make sure that you're leveraging your volunteer base. And if you're not doing fundraising events, you probably need to start, or looking locally at who's funding like causes, at a corporate sponsorship level. Yeah, it's grants. You just never know.
This is interesting. There's so much advice floating around in the grants world in terms of what to do and what not to do, and some of it is good, and some of it is hard to discern if it's good or not. I'd love
Mhm.
to set the record straight. If is there a myth about grant prospecting or funder relationships that you wish you could put to rest once for all?
Yeah, I think I gave away my punchline earlier, but it really is that funders are friends. They really are people behind all of this. They really want to make things. I mean, if there's the option for a partnership, they want to make it happen. So I think that, finding the right funders is so much more important than applying to everything under the sun and hoping something sticks. I really think that we could spend so much time applying for every single funding opportunity under the sun, but really taking the extra time up front to make sure that we're building those relationships before we even put pen to paper. I think that's something that a lot of organizations that are strapped for time and capacity forget. Like, it's very rare that my firm will submit a grant application cold. It's very rare.
Mm.
It's always, we make sure that we're having a conversation, whether in a Zoom room or a real room, ideally. with that funder, with our client, kind of helping to facilitate the meeting, listening there for nuance in terms of if that funder is giving away any clues of how they would like for that application to be aligned. But that pre-work before you even submit a grant application is just, it's so vital. I've seen it time and time again in terms
Mm.
of increasing the odds of being awarded. So it takes time, but it's important and it's necessary.
You mentioned pre-work. Do you have a checklist of sorts that, or something you work through in your, that you said you have a lot locked in your mind, but do you have a process that you follow? Because I'd love to pull out what that process should look like for a nonprofit that's just getting started in grants or trying to improve their process. What does the pre-work process look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. We have kind of an internal document that we use. We have our grant readiness checklist, which is available on our
Hmm.
website. Happy to share. And then we also have kind of an internal, an SOP, for lack of the better word, I would say. As we had new teammates coming on board, they weren't understanding. They think grant writing, that's what you do. You just write the grant. But there's so much more. The writing of the grant is a small piece of the work that we do. So I did start to have that written down so that my team could really understand, oh, so if this is a new relationship, I need to reach out to the funder. I need to schedule the call. I need to prep the client on how to have this conversation with the funder, because we know this particular program officer. We know what they like to hear, what they don't like to hear, that sort of thing. So we have a lot of
Hmm.
that internal nuance. So, but in general, I do have kind of a step by step of what does that look like, and I'd be happy to share that.
Mm, that'd be great. I know we're coming up on time here, so I want to be respectful of your time, and thank you for all that you've shared
Sure.
so far. To wrap it up, though, I'd love to take a step back and think about other grant professionals now. If you were mentoring an up and coming grant professional today, is there a particular piece of advice or anecdote you'd leave with them, help them with everything that's going on today in grant work?
Being out in community is so essential. Like, it's so hard. A lot of us are introverts, as I mentioned, but there's only so many connections that can be made if we're working remotely or we're working from home. Networking is, I know, kind of a word for some, but I've met some of the best people out there, and you just never know where those connections are going to come from. And if you're not out and about, at least starting conversations, like, it's really, really hard to get your foot in the door. It's really, really hard to secure new clients. So the more you can be out in community, the better.
That's good advice. And looking forward into the future, is there something that you hope changes in the grant funding landscape in the next 5 years, or what you're planning for, or what you see the future looking like?
Just a continual, like, leveling of that playing field, like really seeing more grant funders that look at grantees as peers and not that power dynamic that is so difficult to work with. So
Interesting.
yeah, the more and more I hope to be able to add to my Oregon unicorn list. There's only 13 on there. Like, there's only 13 funders in all of Oregon that I consider like the top echelon of, like, they're doing things right. So there needs to be more of them.
Hmm.
But yeah, the ones that are willing to have a conversation ahead of time, a 5-minute conversation can save hours and hours of labor and heartache down the road if you're applying to a grant funder that at the end of the day, you had a less than 1% chance of even securing a grant. So yeah, that leveling of the playing field and the landscape is what I would love to see. And I continue to do work to make that happen as much as I can as one human.
I have to ask this because you said it, but what you said you have 13 unicorn funders. I won't ask you to name them, obviously, but what are the differences like between a unicorn funder and a not unicorn funder
Mm-hmm.
so that other grant professionals can try and look out for those things when they're
Yeah,
considering the funder?
for sure. So those are my funders that general operating support multi-year.
Hmm.
They're broad-based funders, so they fund in a lot of different areas and they fund across the state. They have a human or multiple humans that you can chat with ahead of time. They actually, even most of the time on their applications, have a spot where they say, hey, did you talk to somebody from our foundation before you applied? And if you leave that
Interesting.
blank, that's naughty. That's my favorite. I wish everybody did that. Their award amounts actually match what they talk about on their website, and it's, a substantial amount of money to be able to get a nonprofit to that next level, or, they're not then piecing together, 50 different grants just to do one small program. It's really an impactful level of funding. I think those are the main ones on my unicorn list. I'm pulling it over on my other screen to see if there's anything that I left out.
This is a great checklist. I can see this becoming a resource for people. When you're evaluating funders, check off these things to know if they're a
For
unicorn fund or
sure.
not.
For sure. The big one is the reporting requirements on the back end. Like, just
Mm.
knowing ahead of time we often do a lot of the reporting for our clients, but for those that prefer to do it in-house, like what they're up against, some of our funders here in Oregon, now you can do a quick phone call and that's your final report. And I love that. And a lot of them, require, oh, you got to put our logo on your website. You got to do this. Make sure you're sending us pictures. We need an interim report and a final report and a this and a that. And it's just like, for $5,000? No,
Yeah.
ma'am. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's interesting. I see a lot of folks moving towards just being more lenient and conscious of grantees and their limited amount of time, but others are not moving in that direction, and that's okay too.
Okay, this is great advice. We're going to have to share so many resources from you on these checklists because I think they're great, great to refer to. But want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you have. To close it out, where can people go to learn more about you, your work, and potentially connect?
Awesome, thank you. JustLookLeft.com is our website. I'm on Instagram at JustLookLeftGrants, and then LinkedIn at Just Look Left Grants or Elaine Marie Navarro.
Oh, that's great. And what is the story behind Just Look Left?
Oh
It's a
my
unique
gosh,
name.
it's on my website, but it was my mom and I were on an epic mother-daughter adventure in Europe in 2017, and we were in London, and we were just tired of looking at all the guidebooks and all the stuff, and we just wanted to just venture out. So we kept going down all these fun little alleyways and all these little things, and it was always that we were looking left, and we'd find a fun cafe or a fun this or that. So I bought the URL when we returned because I was going to do a fun food tour in my local town because there was starting to be a lot of fun stuff in our alleyways. I never did that. I sat on the URL forever. And then when it came to launching my consultancy, I was like, you know what? This still rings true for me. It A, it reminds me of my mom and that really great trip. And B, it reminds me to always remain curious, always remain open minded because you never know if you're looking down this way, usually to the left, if
Yeah.
a really unique opportunity or really unique client is going to come your way. So that's where it came from.
Oh, that's really cool. The
Thanks.
coolest grant consultancy name I've heard to date. So that's awesome.
Well, thank you.
Sweet. All right. Thank you so much, Elaine. This was an
Of
awesome conversation.
course, Ryan. Have a great day. Super nice to meet you. Take care.
Thanks.